The movie begins on a dark evening. We see a little girl walking back to her home when suddenly she sees someone appear before her. The little girl stops dead in her tracks and gasps in fear. Quickly turning around, she takes to her heel. She is soon pursued and horrifyingly taken out. A brutal slaughter ensues as everyone in the village is attacked and slayed. The scene then shifts to the present where we see the Central Ministry of Home Affairs, New Delhi. Inside the office, the minister calls upon the CBI special director for a secret mission. As the man arrives, the minister tells him that he has to take care of a serious situation. Upon questioning, the minister tells him that he will have to taint the reputation of a certain man in order to take him down. Saying that, he turns on the TV to show the CBI officer who he is talking about. Inside the TV, a press conference is ongoing. It is live from Hyderabad, where the Home Minister, Eshwar Prasad, is talking to the public. He is questioned about the recent criminal offense happening throughout the country. Several antique and valuable ancient idols have been steadily going missing. Someone is stealing them and the culprit is nowhere to be found. After listening to the zealous audience vent, the man finally gets up and addresses the topic. He passionately defends their points and agrees with them, even going so far as saying that he'll step down from his position if the government fails to recover idols stolen over the last 6 months. His statement is met with negative interpretation by a journalist, and in turn, he discards his decision of resigning by saying that he would instead give his position to one of his trusted men named Ajay, who happens to be the son of a farmer. The scene shifts back to the office of the Central Ministry, where this commitment of Eshwar unsettles his political opponents, sparking a scheme to undermine his credibility. Inside the office, the CBI officer, who had been watching the conference live, refuses to partake in their scheme. The officer defends Eshwar by saying that he is a good man and a good leader. In a country where leaders loot the public money, he has been a helping hand for the poor. Thus, he would not be able to do this task. The ministers hear his refusal and decide to call upon another officer who would take up this daunting task. Their new plan involves enlisting the help of CBI Joint Director Vaishnavi Natarajan. The CBI officer looks at the minister, disappointed, and shortly leaves the room. The next day, we see CBI Director Vaishnavi arriving in Hyderabad. There she is greeted and met with ACP Sampath, who is handling the case of the missing idols. Once the team is all gathered, they start their meeting. Vaishnavi asks for a briefing from the officer, who tells her that these idols are priceless antiques and there is a huge demand for them in foreign countries. People are willing to pay exorbitant prices for these. He believes that it is simply the work of antique robbers. Vaishnavi, however, is skeptical. She argues that to export such huge amounts of priceless idols at once is not that simple. It would have to be the work of someone with a high reach. She tells them that it is not the work of smugglers or robbers, but rather someone new. Vaishnavi then points out that whenever and wherever these idols were stolen, there were ongoing rallies or meetings of Minister Eshwar Prasad nearby. Hearing this, one of the officers chimes in, defending the minister and getting an earful from Vaishnavi. As their meeting continues, ACP Sampath mentions that since Eshwar Prasad is a public figure, it won't be easy for them to get him. He is well loved by the public, thus they may have to face backlash if they act recklessly. This prompts Vaishnavi to reply affirmatively and declare her plan of starting off with Eshwar's previous secretary, Chanchala ready. Chanchala used to be a close confidante of Eshwar, who's currently in jail for the slaughter of her fiancé, Shakti. Hearing her name, Sampath's face pales. He looks at Vaishnavi with a hard expression. It turns out that Shakti was Sampath's brother, and the man has personal beef with this Chanchala woman, who they would soon be investigating. Despite his bitter feelings, Sampath has no choice but to take out his duty. He is tasked with the duty of safely transporting the woman to a discreet location so that people may not know what their investigation is about. To execute this mission, Sampath with his team visits the jail Chanchala is kept. There they swap her with another woman. As the police are taking the real Chanchala outside, she notices another woman entering her cell and gets suspicious. In the meantime, back outside, Sampath tells his team that they would be taking her to Bhagamathi bungalow. As he utters the name, a lamplight above them bursts and the scene takes an eerie turn. All of his team members look petrified and Sampath scolds them for acting immature. They all believe that the old Haveli is supposedly a haunted house. However, Sampath corrects them, saying that it is no longer a Haveli but rather a police guest house and camp office. In the background, Lalit, a police officer who is a member of Sampath's team, tells his colleagues that the place that they are going to is famous for being haunted. That's why he is scared. The place is situated a few kilometers away from his village and is infamous for its scary nature. He tells them about Queen Bhagamathi, who ruled that place. According to his legend, she was a brutal leader who would silence the ones against her rule, and however, she was brutally slaughtered by her enemies and her soul still wanders in that old Haveli. The chubby officer named Bamini is scared after hearing this story and quickly starts praying to ward off ghosts. Shortly after, Chanchala is escorted to a police car. As she sits, Lalit arrives and salutes her. She smiles at the boy and a flashback reveals how she had helped him secure a job at the police force. Soon, everyone boards the vehicles and they set off towards their destination. On the way there, a crow above their car accidentally hits electric wires and falls down, foreshadowing a bad omen. After a considerable amount of time, they finally pull up to Bhagamathi Haveli. Sampath stiffly tells Chanchala that she would be staying at the Haveli for a few days on house arrest. A few officers would be arriving to question her, It would be better for her to cooperate or else they are not averse to taking her out too. The man threatens the girl and then goes towards the place's watchman. The officer snaps at him for not being there last night. The man, in a hushed voice, replies that he has a little son back home so he can't stay here at night, although it is clear from his countenance that he is merely making his family an excuse. The man is petrified of the place. He is then tasked with providing them with daily necessities and groceries. Afterwards, he gladly hands over the keys and goes off to fetch the necessity. The police have set up a camp near the Havely and they would be staying out while the entire place is given to Chanchala, who would be locked in. At the gate of the place, Lalit and Bimini come to ask Chanchala not to enter since there might be ghosts inside. Chanchala enters and starts exploring the insanely huge abode. As she looks around at the ancient drawings, she feels someone or something watching her. On the second floor, she comes across a dusty bookshelf. An old book named Bhagamathi suddenly falls down and she turns back to pick it up without paying it much attention. Her wanderings lead her to eerie and dark corners of the Havely. One particular room catches her attention, but she is unable to open its door. As she tries to look in, suddenly a woman arrives behind her. Startled, she looks back to find the watchman's wife who has come to give her clean clothes. She takes the clothes and goes towards the washroom to wash up. Behind her, the watchman's wife also tries to peep in through the window, gets a scare and runs off. The washroom looks as if it has not been cleaned for centuries. One cannot clean up in such a washroom. Instead, she would be needing to clean up the washroom itself. There, as she watches herself in the mirror, she is transported back in her memories when she used to be Eshwar's secretary. That day, as she was leaving her office, a large crowd of protesters had gathered at her doorstep. They were demanding for them to stop their project, which was affecting the poor farmers' lands and livelihoods. The group is led by a man named Shakti. As Chanchala approaches them, an argument ensues between her and Shakti. The latter demands for her to stop the project and think for the people. However, Chanchala tells him that the project would make a few suffer, but once completed, it would bring peace to millions. As she is making sure to tell them that they would not suffer much, the peaceful protest suddenly turns violent. All of a sudden, chaos ensues and everyone starts attacking each other. Amidst the chaos, Chanchala suddenly gets locked in her car and it catches fire. In that moment of distress, Shakti comes to her rescue, getting himself injured in the process. Chanchala watches the man desperately protect her before losing consciousness. When she comes back to her senses, she finds herself sitting outside the office. The police cars take away the protesters, including Shakti. It turns out that the people who had started were not among the group of protesters, and seeing how Shakti had protected her, Chanchala decides to go and free them. This incident marks the start of their bond as the two start to gradually fall in love with each other. Shakti starts believing in the project and supports Chanchala as they gradually work together in starting the large-scale government project. Soon, the day of their engagement arrives and they are happily engaged. Eshwar Prasad also arrives at the ceremony and lovingly wishes Chanchala a happy engagement. The scene cuts back to the present and we see a melancholic Chanchala looking at her engagement ring that she still wears. This makes us question whether she was truly the perpetrator of the attempted slaughter charges or was she framed. Moments later, she takes out the ring and puts it on the counter. Accidentally, it falls down and rolls under a locked door, away from the poor woman's reach. She uses an iron rod to pull it out. All of a sudden, her body chills as she senses a strange presence behind her. Quickly getting out, she waits in another room. Back outside, the CBI officer arrives. She checks out the area and after being satisfied by its privacy and security, visits the police camp beside the Havely. Inside, Sampath briefs her about all the cameras that they have installed inside. Approving the situation, they head towards the interrogation room. Sampath is kept out of the interrogation chambers for fear that Chanchala might not speak up seeing him. He goes back to the hub where they keep a record of each and everything that is happening in the interrogation room. Once inside, Vaishnavi takes charge of questioning Chanchala, hoping to uncover clues against Eshwar. Meanwhile, back in one of his public appearances, Eshwar is approached by Ajay, who tells him that there might be a plan going on in the background to sabotage his rule. The man smiles kindly at him and declares in front of everyone that even if God lets him go, the public would always be by his side. Back in the Havely, Vaishnavi continues probing Chanchala, who tells her how Eshwar started off as a student leader and gradually gained respect to become a well-known public figure. He was offered high posts, but refused them and decided to work for the people. When asked about his character, she mentions how he misses out on family time due to overworking for a good cause, still continuing to pay his son's student loans who studies in America. She also tells Vaishnavi about his close friends and his hobby of visiting temples or his guest house. She makes sure to mention that Eshwar goes to visit temples to get the Lord. When the CBI officer tries to put corruption charges on Eshwar, Chanchala cryptically hints that they're doubting Eshwar's integrity without any substantial evidence. Despite Vaishnavi's probing, she remains enigmatic yet suggestive in her responses, leaving doubts hanging over Eshwar's credibility, without providing concrete proof. Unable to find anything that benefits her investigation, Vaishnavi ends the interrogation for the day. Later that night, the entire Havely falls into darkness due to load shedding. Chanchala tries to check the switches but to no avail. Taking a flashlight, she goes downstairs to eat dinner. There, she sees strange lit patterns on the ceiling. All of a sudden, the waters break and the place gets filled with water. Scared, she quickly moves away. On her way, she starts hearing strange noises. Moments later, she comes across the book from earlier and takes it to her room to read. While reading, she suddenly remembers her ring from earlier and goes off to fetch it. This time, however, she somehow manages to open the door and take it. As she moves out of the room, unbeknownst to her, the door closes on its own. The strange sounds start again and she goes out in search of its source. This leads her to a passageway that directly ends up outside. She comes back inside her bedroom. She finds the carcass of a deceased bat. Catching movement, she comes back out. Just then, an unnatural number of bats starts to dive in her direction. Screaming, she runs, falls her way down the stairs, gets up and runs again. Breathless, she comes out and screams for help. She tells them about the strange hauntings and they decide to call Sampath on instructions about what to do. The ACP coldly tells them to let her be, as she must be acting. The next morning, poor Chanchala awakens on the stairs, just outside the house where she slept out of fear. The watchman's wife arrives and applies ointment on her wounds, all the while musing how she could have the heart to harm anyone when she is scared so easily. The scene shifts back to the past where Sampath is meeting the lawyers who are handling his brother's case. They tell him how the case can be ruled as self-defense since they have Shakti's fingerprints in the attacking position on the revolver too. Back to the present, Vaishnavi arrives for interrogation again and tries to probe once more, but to no avail. With no other choice left, Vaishnavi tries to offer her a chance at escaping her prison sentence in exchange for intel on Eshwar. However, her proposition is rejected and the team comes to a conclusion after analysis that she is speaking the truth. Meanwhile, back in Amandir, Eshwar Prasad has come to humbly pay his respects. As they set off back home, we see Ajay in the background acting suspiciously. He receives a call from one of the robbers and it becomes clear that he is included in the ongoing case. Back in the Haveli, night falls and an eerie event unfolds when Chanchala enters a new bedroom. There, she uncovers a painting of a hanged woman on the wall. All of a sudden, things start to fall and she finds an old video player among them. Despite the fear, she takes it with her. Once outside, the hallway lamp breaks and Chanchala starts to scream. Lalit and the other officer named Subhash hear her screams and rush to see. Lalit calls Sampath, who tells him to find her through the cameras. When she isn't found anywhere, the ACP tells them to go in with the gun and shoot at the first sign of suspicious activity. They rush inside and find a video player playing an old video. Subhash becomes strangely captivated by the video when out of nowhere, Chanchala pops up in front of the screen. It appears that she is being dragged and thrashed by a strange spirit. The woman is brutally dragged inside the same room she visited earlier. As the two scared men enter, they find Chanchala possessed by the ghost of Bhagamathi, uttering strange Arabic phrases. The possessed woman declares that she has come back to exact her revenge. The next day, this unexpected turn of events prompts the CBI team to seek assistance from a psychiatrist. Upon observation, the psychiatrist concludes that Chanchala might be experiencing symptoms of schizophrenia. He bases this diagnosis on her apparent shift in personality, wherein she narrates a story as if it were her own, adopting a different persona. The narrative she shares revolves around Queen Bhagamathi, a princess who confronted the Nawab during a tumultuous period when the dynasty of King Devraj faced invasion due to the lack of male heirs. According to her story, Queen Bhagamathi encountered Chandrasenan, a man initially perceived as benevolent but who later revealed his true nature upon obtaining power as a general. Chandrasenan exploited his position, pillaging wealth, land, and even desecrating sacred places. To further his deceitful agenda, he propagated rumors of Bhagamathi's supposed madness, effectively imprisoning her within her chambers. Overwhelmed by this unjust confinement, Bhagamathi chose to end. The psychiatrist's professional recommendation is that the CBI consider committing Chanchala to an asylum, as her behavior and recounted story strongly suggest a dissociative state or detachment from reality, indicating a potential case of schizophrenia. That night, Subhash and Bamini are tasked with staying near Chanchala. There, Subhash plays a prank on poor Bamini, who almost faints out of fear. The next day, Vaishnavi looks at Chanchala's biodata and finds that she does not speak Arabic. However, Bhagamathi did. As a last resort to understand these strange happenings, the team even summons a Tantric to rule out any presence of an evil spirit. The spiritual man arrives at the scene and tells them that he would only be able to tell whether there is a spirit in the house or not. He cannot expel it. As they enter the house through a back route, Sampath finds Chanchala's slipper there. He wonders why she didn't run away despite having the chance. The Tantric tells Sampath that the spirit present inside would never let her escape. The man sets a few sacred relics around the house, telling Sampath to look out for them, and if the marble turns black and the water starts to smell, he should know that there is an evil entity present in the house. The next day, Vaishnavi comes for one final interrogation. She asks about the project that Eshwar Prasad was working on. She tells the woman everything, and afterwards is asked by the officer to leave. As she leaves, she is asked by Vaishnavi if she met Shakti during this project. With a melancholic expression, Chanchala leaves the room. The scene cuts back to the past where we see the day the villagers were supposed to evacuate their homes. By accident, Shakti finds out about cash being given to the villagers and suspects that the project is being taken advantage of. He sternly asks the villagers not to leave and goes to investigate the situation. As Chanchala is sitting in her office, she gets a call from one of her subordinates. The man wails as he tells her how Shakti is beating the shit out of the poor man. She rushes back home to hear what is happening. As she arrives, she finds a livid Shakti who blames her for deceiving him and using her power for corruption. The scene shifts back to the present, where we see Sampath conversing with his lawyer, who tells him that Chanchala would be released in a few days, as the case would be declared as self-defense. Pulsing with rage, he rushes back with his revolver in hand. Once he reaches the property, he makes sure to evacuate everyone and turn off the cameras. It seems as though he has decided to exact revenge on his brother's behalf. Upon entering the house, he remembers the spiritual guru's words and checks to see the signs to verify the presence of any paranormal activity. Upon further investigation, Sampath uncovers these eerie signs that indeed point to the existence of ghosts in the bungalow. To his dismay, he discovers Chanchala in a distressed state, seemingly under the influence of an unseen force. Concerned for her well-being and convinced that she poses a danger to herself, Sampath makes the difficult decision to transfer Chanchala to a mental asylum for proper care and evaluation. The next day, Vaishnavi decides to end the investigation, deciding that Eshwar is indeed an innocent man. On the other hand, Eshwar hears about Chanchala and visits her at the mental asylum. There, a startling revelation comes to light. It becomes apparent that Chanchala orchestrated the entire charade as a means to evade the scrutiny of the CBI, in exchange for a staggering kickback of 300 rupees core from Eshwar. In the meantime, Vaishnavi also visits the Haveli one last time and finds out about Chanchala's scripts too. Eshwar had transferred all his corrupt 18 crores to Chanchala's bank as his proof. It was decided that once the investigation concluded, she would take her part and transfer the rest back. After conversing, he comes back out and tells his secretary how he plans to take all the money and let Chanchala just rot in jail. On the other side, a registrar approaches Vaishnavi to discuss Eshwar's farmhouse. He tells her all about the man's corrupt ways, how he deceitfully bought land on lower rates and then sold these back to the government expensively. All the surrounding villages that came under this project sold their lands except one which opposed it, the same village that Shakti supported. During this unfolding, Vaishnavi begins to piece together Chanchala's cryptic attempts to expose Eshwar's nefarious deed. She connects the dots, realizing that Chanchala used the story of Queen Bhagamathi as a symbolic narrative to unveil Eshwar's crimes. Back in the hospital, Eshwar comes back with documents for Chanchala to sign. However, he is shocked when she writes Bhagamathi instead of her own name. Angry, he slams the files onto the table when Chanchala finally lays bare her last card. It turns out that she was not helping him but rather planning to make his nefarious deeds public. It is then shockingly unveiled that Eshwar had coerced Chanchala into committing the heinous act of slaughtering Shakti. He used this as leverage to lock her up. Furthermore, to make sure she keeps her mouth shut, he threatened harm to the locked-up villagers involved in the project in order to cover up his corrupt dealings. On the other side, Lalit brings back a video camera that recorded the villagers' slaughter as proof. On the other side, the police also find the locked-up villagers and free them. All the perpetrators are also finally caught and the lost idols are found. As Eshwar becomes aware that his deceit has been laid bare, his anger flares. Quickly, he takes out his revolver and points it at Chanchala. Just then, Sampath arrives, taking him out for good. It turns out that Sampath found out about the truth regarding Chanchala's innocence the day he went after her in the Haveli. With the truth finally revealed and her name cleared, Chanchala emerges as a symbol of resilience and honor. She directs her efforts towards running a charitable organization in memory of Shakti, aiming to honor his legacy and make a positive impact. In a surprising revelation, Vaishnavi shares with Chanchala their assumption that they knew everything about her, only to discover that she possessed remarkable skills as a magician in her childhood, and even had knowledge of Arabic. However, Chanchala shocks them by denying any knowledge of Arabic. The movie ends with this revelation which leaves Vaishnavi and Sampath bewildered. The scene shifts back to the Haveli where the two bowls containing the spiritual relics start acting up, suggesting that there might have indeed been supernatural forces at play.